Hey, hey, welcome to Film Fanatics, three film geeks discussing movies both new and old. My name is Dan.
My name is Justin.
And I'm Joe.
This week, the second film in the Divergent series, Insurgent, hits the big screen. Liam Neeson takes his special set of skills again and runs all night, and we'll review the vampire parody film What We Do in the Shadows and Elijah Wood in Open Windows. Our triple feature of older films is the original Divergent, Listener's Choice Old Classic, the 1999 film Go, and for our Oscar A to Z, we're up to The Assassination of Jesse James. And because we have such a Divergent-heavy show, our top 5 is going to look at our favorite young adult film adaptations. Since we are doing Divergent for the old classic, we're going to mix things up a little bit this week and start with our old classic, which is Divergent, and that will lead us into the new film, Insurgent. So Joe is going to tell us about that.
Divergent is a 2014 American science fiction action film directed by Neil Berger and based on the novel of the same name by Veronica Roth. The film is the first installment in the Divergent series. It stars Shailene Woodley, Theo James, Ashley Judd, Miles Teller with Whiplash, Maggie Q of That One Show I Like, and Kate Winslet of That One Movie That Dan Likes.
Very much.
The story takes place in a dystopian, post-apocalyptic version of Chicago, where people are divided into distinct factions based on human virtues and personality traits. Beatrice Pryor, played by Woodley, is warned that she is divergent, and thus will never fit into any one of the factions, and soon learns that a sinister plot is brewing into her seemingly perfect society. This film certainly has a plot, look, and theme similar to Hunger Games and other YA dystopia series, which have been so popular since Harry Potter ended, leaving a massive hole in the hearts of many. The best thing for me were some convincing performances. Everyone does a good job bringing fairly relatable characters to life. The action was also fun, providing fun visuals and an epic scope. The dream sequences offer interesting visuals as well. It does have its share of annoying problems, mostly due to the structure of the society for me. One must wonder what the purpose of the Dauntless are. Are they a police force or a parkour club? I'm still not sure even with the second film. Also, the government seems to be really unconcerned about the Divergent concept until the action needs more spicing up. And in the second, we learn there's really a lot more divergence. Not a lot of spoilers there, but seems to be a consistent problem, which you'd think people would notice more. Still, the message of the movie is one many teens could get behind, along with some decent characters and fun ideas. I leave it with a B.
Well, when we first reviewed this movie exactly a year ago, I have to say I was very taken with it. I gave it a B+, and on its second viewing, it's easier to see some of the plot issues, some of the more generic aspects of the film. Joe, you mentioned the Hunger Games relationship, and since I've seen The Giver, which obviously was a book before this movie came out, there's a lot of common themes.
Tell it's borrowing a lot.
Yeah, there as well. And it's also possible I was a little blindsided by the notion that this was the first non-Hunger Games YA adaptation in at least a year that wasn't completely horrible. We had a real bad run there for a while. Vampire Academy, The Mortal Instruments, the list goes on. But that being said, I do stand by a lot of what I said. Woodley gives a great performance. I really love how the simulation sequences, the dream sequences are shot, and I enjoy the story elements and the tension-filled climax. And I said it then, and I agree on the second go-around, I don't think it feels its 2 hour and 20-minute runtime. I really think it actually goes pretty briskly. I am going to bump it down just a little, but I as well, Joe, give it a B. Now, the rule for the new classic is that at least two of the three of us must give this film a B- or higher, indicating a positive grade. So for this one, I know in the first go-around, Justin was really not a huge fan of the Divergent film. So, Justin, let's hear from you on round 2 here of Divergent.
Well, it's kind of funny, Dan. I'm sort of finding myself a lot on the same points that I made originally. I wanted to give this a lower grade simply because of its story. Honestly, if it weren't for a couple things, this probably would have been a D or D+ movie. But I think part of how this concept is sold is how well the people involved are willing to convey it. And I think that's where Divergent gets its pity points for me. Woodley does a very good job. I feel like some of the other cast people do as well. And it gives, frankly, rather odd material some degree of interest and intrigue, even though I feel like every time there's a plot hole or an inconsistency, it's glaringly obvious, especially in the first film. But I feel like the biggest issue I have with this franchise is it's always trying to do too much. I feel like in both movies, it's incredibly overstuffed, and just when we think we can have time to breathe, it decides to end on a cliffhanger to offer up even more overstuffing. I don't regret watching it, it's just nowhere near as good as Hunger Games, and Certainly not as good as any of the other dystopian stories that we've had in recent years. I give it a C. I still stand on it.
But to be fair, you don't really like the Hunger Games as much as Joe and I either.
No, but I mean, I can at least see the value of the Hunger Games. There's a very interesting parallel with the flaws. Hunger Games has a very coherent structure, but has a terrible villain. Divergent has a really good villain whose motives actually make sense, even though they're kind of generic. But the structure makes no sense whatsoever. Some of the factions blend into each other. Divergents make absolutely zero sense whatsoever, and gets even more confusing in the second movie.
I think in the second movie is where it goes really off the rails there.
Well, I think most of what you're saying does make sense in the first film. I agree with Joe. I think,
it's generic.
I'm not saying it's breaking new ground,
but it's
here, I understand what's happening, and that's not the areas I really find the plot holes in. I think the factions make sense. I
don't.
What doesn't make sense about them?
Yeah, I was curious.
They often blur into each other. It's like, okay, abnegation is supposed to be this kind of like selfless society, but we also have other factions that are kind of honest and open-minded. It's like, don't these kind of blur together?
I think it's just general personality traits, but some of them aren't as well defined as others. Like
they're horribly defined.
One or two that are kind of vague, to be honest.
And here's my other big issue with the movie: Triss's motives make no sense. She literally turns on a dime. She starts off actually okay with the system, and then turns into this big rebel in like the middle of Act 2.
Well, she finds out some
pretty big things,
pretty crucial information about her old faction and her family members.
Mm-hmm. No. I mean, at the very start of the first movie, she's totally on board.
But yeah, because she doesn't know anything.
I mean, she's asking questions. It's like, you can't seem to decide what you are. It's like, you're trying to be a rebel, but you're totally okay with this, and then all of a sudden, you're not.
She's supposed to be a teenager. That's the point. She's trying to figure out who she is.
And all of it is new to her.
Yeah, it's a new process.
It's not. You've been a part of this for 16 years.
She never heard of.
She never heard of a Divergent before.
I'm not saying that part. I'm saying she's totally okay with how the system works, even though
it's because she's a kid,
and then she's in these like inquisitive moments where it's like, "Oh, you're a rebel," but you're really not.
Have you ever heard of a kid who goes to church with his family for 18 years, and that's what he believes? And then
they go outside.
They go to college, or they break from the family, and they realize, oh,
I'm not referring.
I feel like I think of this. I feel like I think this way now. She was raised in this society.
That's not the scene I'm
factions.
referring to. The moments leading up to her actually joining Dauntless, no sense whatsoever. She is actually okay with it. She has one moment where she's kind of inquisitive, kind of skeptical, which comes out of nowhere and is completely out of character. But for the most part, she's actually okay with the system.
I will admit, I think it might have been a little quick, but generally speaking, in these stories, the individual is okay with things, and then they find something is revealed, and then, they start questioning more.
No, I mean, like...
Then the rebel.
Okay.
It's the way it works.
Example. Hunger Games. Katniss, skeptical from beginning to end.
Well, because of her situation. It's completely different worlds.
Not really. I mean, she's still...
Yes!
Absolutely.
No, I mean, she's part of a district.
But
correct? No, let me finish.
Okay,
let me finish.
Go ahead.
She's part of a district, has her own thoughts, remains consistent with those thoughts, yet the more she gets involved in that situation, her character grows and the motives make sense. Triss starts out one way, has no reason to be skeptical, then just magically gets skeptical later on for no reason.
Justin, it's a different environment, though, for both characters.
Not really. One is a horrible gladiator-style battle to the death. Another one is a horrible dystopia.
Think about where they come from, though. For Katniss, her situation sucks. So, she's got to
absolutely dire.
She's obviously going to have a grudge against the Capitol from the beginning, no matter what. Now, with Woodley's character, Trish, I mean, she may not be comfortable where she is, but it's not like her faction's bad.
Right.
It's an okay, cool society that it's the perfect society she's a part of. It's like she's living in the Capitol.
According to them, because they don't know that there's a bigger picture,
from her perspective,
all of the factions are okay in their own way.
But the Hunger Games comparison, different districts, a lot of them are subjugated badly, and people are begrudging against the Capitol. That's how things get started. So, environmentally speaking, it's very different.
You're also saying that it's not in her character. Number one, as Joe said, she's a teenager. Number two, it's literally like the second scene of the movie. We don't know her character yet.
I didn't in the beginning.
She's still finding her way because she's a teenager, and we're still learning about her because we were just introduced
I'm sorry, Dan, but the teenager ploy can only work so much. I'm sorry, I understand confliction, but there's a difference between confliction and just flat-out random character development.
But that early in the movie, though...
It's the second scene of the movie.
I don't care. Bad character development is bad character development.
Okay.
Maybe,
I mean, I think we learn about a character as they go along.
I think it's establishment.
And she is learning information as well. Until she meets Maggie Q, who tells her, hey, I wrote down abnegation, but, you know.
You got to look at it this way. At that point, we're learning about the world through her eyes. So it's more as well for the audience as for her. So we're kind of growing with her in that sense. It's pretty early in the movie to make massive jumps.
Other than her inconsistencies of character.
Big thing for you.
Yeah. Was she inconsistent elsewhere in the movie or just in this beginning portion?
Well, I mean, that and the fact that, like, goes from getting stomped repeatedly to becoming a total badass in, like, the course of 15 minutes. It's like, no, you are a terrible fighter.
No, but Maggie Q explains that about her brother later on in the movie at the tattoo parlor. Mm-hmm. She says that the same thing happened to her brother. He was Divergent.
You can do better than that. At least give us some build-up to that, or at least some progression instead of, no, we're going to have 2 scenes where she gets completely stomped, and it's like, nope, she's now, like, total badass.
Well, she's also getting help from 4.
Sort of,
which is
an entirely different issue.
It's true.
4 is completely biased and basically a jerk when you think about it. But he lets, like, 4 people die. Like, the entire finale, where it's like, oh, yes, the Divergents actually have an advantage over Dauntless in this. He literally just goes to Trish just because he cares about her. It's like, no, you are a horrible human being.
Wouldn't you, though, go to the person you love? It's a romantic... This particular installment is a bit romantic.
And it's just the Dauntless...
I mean, it makes sense.
She's fairly new, so, you know, she's got to get
selfish
used to
jerk.
It. I don't think he's that selfish.
I don't either.
I mean...
Yes, he's got his eye on her, and he's attracted to her,
no one seems to care that's a matter of bias, a.k.a. weakness by their standards, but...
Well, that is one of my plot issues, is that, you know...
Not really that clearly consistent there.
Yeah, I mean, they're a little... They go a little off the rails a little bit of their own rules there.
A little.
You know, Justin, it's moments like these where I think...
Just fail the movie, Justin.
Like
you hate it.
Like, is a C really a relevant grade? Like, you just go lower, man. It's just one of those moments where, like...
You obviously have a lot of issues with this movie.
I do have a lot of issues with it. It's probably the most conflicted movie I had in 2014 because there's so many things wrong with it, but there are good things about it.
Okay, well, let's see how the new one grabs you then, Justin. Insurgent is the new film based on the second book in that series. It's a sci-fi adventure film directed this time by Robert Schwentke, and it takes place 3 days after the end of Divergent. Triss here is on the run after basically sabotaging a coup at the end of the first film, along with her brother, played by Ansel Elgort, and 4. And for some reason, Miles Teller's character comes along too, even though he was really horrible to her throughout the first movie. Winslet returns as Janine Matthews, and in this installment is hunting down any Divergents, Joe briefly mentioned this, such as Triss, to attempt opening a mysterious box she believes will help her in her efforts to stop the Divergent problem. Newcomers to the series include Octavia Spencer, Naomi Watts, and Daniel Day Kim in supporting roles. Now, the easiest thing to notice right up front with Insurgent is that the director is different from the first. The entire tone of the film is different. It's much more sci-fi and effects-driven, and the little romance present here is an afterthought. Now, these things are a bit of a mixed bag, because I'm definitely glad they toned down the romance to focus on story, but the effects are sometimes a little overbearing and come off as confusing. Poor Winslet doesn't seem to have a great motivation here as she did in the first movie, but I do like the story here. I like the interactions between the characters. Teller's character, specifically, who I hated in Divergent, has a little bit more depth in this one. But the strongest thing I can say about the film is, even though I had just sat through the first Divergent directly before this to me also flew by. When it seemed to be in the climax, I looked at the time because it felt like only an hour had gone by. It is far from perfect, but I have to say I like the direction the series is going in, and unlike the second Hunger Games, Justin, I don't know how you'll feel about this, but I thought this movie also served as a standalone. Yes, it ends on sort of a cliffhanger, but nothing like the cliffhanger from Catching Fire. I give the movie, much like I gave Divergent the first time around, a B+. Joe, what did you think of Insurgent?
I also felt that the time went by pretty quickly. I thought that there were some interesting aspects to the story this time around, but I thought that the plot holes and issues were a little bit easier to find.
Mm-hmm. Like, yeah, they were bigger.
Like
for sure.
Like the whole device that they're trying to open offers a lot of problems, and the ultimate twist there, I feel kind of... The one thing I liked about the first movie, and I think that you kind of briefly mentioned this just now, actually, is that it actually felt to me like kind of a standalone story. And I felt that the ending of the first movie was pretty sufficient. It didn't really need to be a series. So I felt like this one, it was a little more...
I did too.
It was a little more obvious in this one that it's kind of stretching out the story longer than it needs to. And I felt like it's going in a different direction that it didn't necessarily need to go to again. It was okay, but it was kind of ultimately unnecessary. I did like the characterization. I do think Willie does a really good job here as well.
Yeah.
I didn't really understand Teller's character's presence either, but I did like the direction he went, actually, even though it didn't really, once again, feel necessary. But it was fine. Yeah, I like the more action-driven story. I thought the effects weren't as good here either. I thought that the dream sequences were fun, but they were better in the first movie. On the whole, I thought it was decent. I enjoyed it, but I also felt like it, once again, didn't really need to happen. And also, I thought that Naomi Watts didn't really add anything at all.
No, she didn't. I love her, but
she didn't add anything.
Yeah, maybe she appears more in the next book. I don't know.
The only thing that really bugged me was that I felt like the acting wasn't quite as good in this one for some of the supporting cast.
Really?
Like maybe it's because of the script, honestly. But you said Winslet, her motivation was very good at the beginning. She looked like she was having a struggle with some of her lines.
She seemed a little confused, to be honest. God bless her,
but little out of it. And I couldn't help but get the feeling that in the opening scenes with Teller, he reads his lines like he's just literally telling you the plot sarcastically, like
pretty much.
And I think a lot of the other characters actually do that too. Like they exposit things. Like some people obviously aren't taking this quite as seriously as they could. I thought that was obvious.
Okay.
So maybe that weekend
I'll have to look back at that.
But if you look at some of the inflections and listen to it, like this isn't them reading like the script. This is them just telling you and just kind of having fun on the set. So didn't think it was as good as the first one, but still decent. I give it a B-.
Okay. Justin, how about for you?
This one honestly does very little to dissuade me. However, I do think there's a lot of potential in this. For all my issues with the Divergent series, I do like the action-driven atmosphere. I think that's really where it, no pun intended, diverges from the Hunger Games. But for me, the biggest issue I have with this one is every time I think the story starts getting interesting, the less and less sense I think it starts making. Now, I'll give you the fact that there are more noticeable plot holes this time, but they didn't quite bother me as much as they did the first go-around. I at least could tell where they were going, or at least could see what they were trying to convey. But it's hard to appreciate what this movie's trying to do or say when they are this out in the open. I do agree with you the fact on the acting part. I have no idea why Miles Teller has a big a part as he has in this, particularly after all his flack that he got after the first movie, criticizing it. But
Whiplash.
Yeah, his star's rising. I mean, you got to keep him in.
I guess even after talking smack about the first one, but...
Well, look at Megan Fox in the Transformers series. I mean...
Got kicked off after 2, but...
Yeah, but she complained after the first.
But like I said, I think it's slightly better, but it's still not great. I give it a C+.
I do think it's a slightly better movie, and critically it is really not doing very well. Not that the first one, was a big hit with critics either, but...
Pretty low.
I do think this is a better movie. I do agree, though, Joe, I like the effects, but I agree with you that it's a little too effects-driven, and I don't know if they amped that up because of the 3D.
I think so.
It seems like it.
Well, I actually saw it in 2D, but I could really tell where the 3D was, and I didn't think it was converted very well.
Mm-hmm. No, it was post.
Like even from I was just like it looked incredibly obvious to me, like it just was really unnecessary. Mm-hmm. And I think from a 2D standpoint, the fact that I was able to tell that and pick out the segments of the screen that easily, usually that stuff it gets by me a little bit, so that did bug me visually.
I didn't notice much 3D at all, to be honest. Like when it first started, and they were at Octavia Spencer's faction, I liked sort of the look of that and the setup of that, and that was decent 3D. But then after maybe 5-10 minutes, I didn't notice really anything else was even in 3D. Even those effects heavy scenes, I thought they didn't really pop. Like I think they could have. But you might find this interesting. I'm told, Joe, that that box doesn't exist in the book. They made that up for the movie.
That's accurate.
Well, that makes a lot of sense, because that was a big MacGuffin. It was a really big MacGuffin.
I honestly did like this, because I feel like I feel like you could actually end the series here. Pretty much everything does get resolved to a...
Yeah, I mean, I think it's a pretty good ender. It does not... I mean... Yeah, just like any movie, you could say, oh, what's going to happen next when they reach the thing, but it also kind of ends.
The majority of the questions are answered.
Yeah, basically.
With that particular story, that's my problem with it.
Right.
The ending leads to another part of the series, which honestly is going to make it seem like, well,
A two-parter at that.
Two-parter, exactly. And it's like, okay, how much, and of course, and I'm just thinking, well, how much is the Divergence really going to factor into this big plan? Like, is it really that important? I mean, in all honesty, I was getting Maze Runner flashbacks. Because, I mean, like, this, we're entering a totally, seriously, we're entering a totally different story.
One of my least favorites.
But it's similar.
Yes.
We're entering a totally different story.
I agree that, like the Maze Runner, it seems like let's take this in a completely different story. But the difference here is, I guess because this is the second movie, there were unanswered questions from the first movie that get resolved here. Maze Runner is just the first movie, and they expect us to
take it all in.
Take it all in and then go to this other completely separate plot.
Yeah, it's really weird. To be fair, it's kind of a lesser degree the same pattern as Hunger Games, which is, I think, what they're going with, you know.
Well, and what I think is interesting is this series just isn't as popular as the Hunger Games or Twilight or Harry Potter. There is literally no reason to make the third book 2 movies. These movies make less than half of what the Hunger Games movies make.
Well, as long as they're going to make profit, I guess.
I guess.
Maximize it.
But, I mean, it's not a cash cow, and judging by the lukewarm response to the second film, I mean, are people rushing out for the third one? I don't know.
Generally speaking, you know, people go off the basic views of the critics. I mean, people go to Rotten Tomatoes, they see that 30%. Well, we're not going to see that, so they don't see that movie, and then
they're lost.
Then they're definitely not going to see the next one. So,
right.
No, I mean, I would just rethink the whole part 1, part 2 thing. Yes, you might make more money, but I mean, it's Divergent. It's already underperforming all those major franchises that you just mentioned.
Right.
So I mean,
by a lot.
I don't know. I really wish that was something Hollywood would get out of their heads. But
that would be cool if they just decided to make it the one movie. But yeah, I don't know. I mean, everyone signed on, I guess. Justin, you thought the factions were a little confusing in the first one. Did you like that we got to see a little more of some of the factions in this?
I did like that we saw more, but I didn't like the fact they were basically reduced to episodic vignettes.
Well, I mean, they weren't really the focal point of the story, but I thought it was at least interesting to see them as they're, as Trish and 4 are running through.
It was nice to see it. I mean, Octavia Spencer guest appearance, basically, but...
Yeah, I mean, she's only in the first 15 minutes of the movie.
If that.
But,
got some good Lost previews,
Yeah, that was good. I love Daniel Day Kim. He was good. I liked his part a lot, actually.
Like, that part was awesome.
Yeah.
I wish they'd expand a little more on that element of the society. Like, that's one area I wish they would have gone if we learned a little bit more about the factions so we can understand them better.
Yeah, it's something maybe I would like to see in the third movie.
Maybe.
Explore that a little bit more. But, all right, well, let's move on here. We've got Run All Night up next, and that is with Joe.
Run All Night is an American action thriller written by Brad Inglesby and directed by Jean Collet-Serra. The film stars Liam Neeson, Joel Kinnaman, that guy, Common, and Ed Harris. Mobster and hitman Jimmy Conlon, played by Neeson, has one night to figure out where his loyalties do lie, with his estranged son Mike, played by Kinnaman, whose life is in danger, or his longtime best friend, mob boss Sean McGuire, played by Harris, who wants Mike to pay for the death of his son at the hands of Jimmy. Father and son are on the run from the mob, corrupt cops, and an assassin, played by the rapper Common. Which is hilarious. This is the third project between this director and Neeson, and seems to land at about the same level of their previous films. It's a more standard story than Unknown or Nonstop. This makes it perhaps less interesting a premise, but does flow well narratively. Perhaps it's due to my interest in these types of films that it was easy for me to get absorbed into this world. It's kind of somewhere between John Wick and The Drop in atmosphere. I thought Ed Harris played a decent villain, and Kinnaman is more likable here than in a certain other film that I've yielded him in, and I'll forgive him for that. We can't forgive ourselves for taking RoboCop. I'm sure it was a good idea. The plot works. It's just been done many times over. I think the thing that holds it down are some of its editing elements, though, making some of the action scenes hard to follow due to many fast cuts. Not to mention many random CGI transitions of the city, which just seem really out of place to me, stylistically. The characterization of Jimmy could have been handled a little better, as he's portrayed as a drunk, but then goes into his particular set of skills mode, so I wasn't really convinced from the get-go on that. Overall, though, Run All Night is an enjoyable, but a little rough around the edges, with nothing really new to bring to the Mafia revenge story. I'll leave with a B-.
Justin?
Well, listeners, it's official. I'm sick of Neeson's particular set of skills. Nonstop was dumb, but it was just the right kind of dumb to make it work and
Nonstop was great.
And be fun escapist entertainment. Run All Night's just a dark and ugly thriller that's that gets off better than it should thanks to the people involved and John Clay Sarah to varying degrees. Neeson and Harris are honestly giving it their all despite, frankly, really weak material. Some of the action's interesting, even though I think the editing's really out of control at points, and I loathe, to the point that I was getting disoriented, the Google Maps style transitions. But I mean, I do like the general concept of this story of fathers. It's just really bogged down by also trying to be about Neeson and his son, and in between trying to be a story about redemption in the middle of all that, and it just sort of feels bogged down and confused at times. That said, I don't think it's the worst thing in the world. It's just, I think the whole Liam Neeson action hero thing is getting way out of control and it needs to come to an end. I think this is probably the movie to do it. I give it a C.
Yeah, it's ridiculous how many movies he's done now with the same basic character. For Run All Night, you definitely have to check your brain at the door. You really have to suspend your disbelief more than even some of the recent action movies. One issue, though, that you guys didn't mention is there's like 4 sets of bad guys all chasing after Neeson. So none of them are really defined, least of all Common, who gets third billing in this movie and doesn't even show up till the movie's half over.
Don't you know, man? He hates Neeson.
Like
Pretty much.
Yeah, I know. He hates Neeson.
I do it for free. Why? I don't know.
You're a
bad
hitman.
because
No,
evil.
you don't do it for free. Like,
But Harris is like, yeah, I got a good deal there.
Discount.
Harris. He's barely in it too. Like, they're best friends, and then they have this nice chat, and then they are trying to kill each other because they're sons. It's just like, it's such a mess. I agree that it was kind of fun, but it really added nothing to the mix, and especially the Neeson specific mix. I'm right in between you guys. It's a C+ for me. I thought it was all right, but I'm over it too, Justin. Walk Among the Tombstones was like the one little twinge of like difference in the character, but even that movie wasn't very good.
No, that could have been really good.
Yeah, I guess it could have been.
But I mean, ironically enough, I think Walk Among the Tombstones and Run All Night sort of have the same issue. Like, we have this flawed character that's dealing with addiction and all this other stuff that's sort of torn his own whole life apart. But we never get a whole lot of time to explore that character, and then we try to be an action thriller in between to the point that we never really feel connected to anyone involved in the story.
But that's all of them. Nonstop, he was a raging alcoholic too. That's why when he was being the air marshal, they thought, oh, well, you're just drunk, air marshal.
But at least we had the fun mystery element to that.
Yeah, listen, I love Nonstop, but what was The Gray? I mean, we don't get his character at all in The Gray either.
No, that's not true.
His wife dies,
a little
and
bit.
he's mad at wolves. I mean,
No, it's a little more complicated
I
than
know.
that.
Joe likes The Gray a lot more than I do.
Yeah, I know, but I know what you're saying. He has played in the action roles. It's been like the same character the last 10 movies.
And what's very annoying about it is, obviously, that's not where he started his career. He started with these deep dramas.
And comedies, too, occasionally.
Some comedies. But in that regard, the only thing we've seen recently of that is The Million Ways to Die in the West,
Ugh.
which was awful, to me anyway. And a very minor role in the Lego Movie, which was fun. And he was having fun with it. But why don't we see
Variety again?
Yeah.
Why don't we see that kind of variety if we know he's got it?
Well, because people like the Taken thing, and they'll still go see it, and he's making money off it.
Unfortunately.
Yeah, but not, I mean, each one
less.
of the non-Taken movies, I guess. I mean, Taken 3 still did okay, but every non-Taken role that he does, makes like half of what its predecessor made. So much so that it's really quite diminishing results.
Well, maybe he'll get back into it pretty soon.
Because he's a really talented character actor.
Yeah, I haven't seen a dramatic performance from him in a long time, and that's sad because,
Or at least a solid one.
I mean, I can't think of one. What's the last dramatic performance he had?
I guess you could probably argue Walk Among the Tombstones, but
That's an action movie, though. I mean, he's killing people.
Thriller.
It's a thriller. It's all under the
it's
same
more like
umbrella.
a hard-boiled... Never mind. Go
Put
on.
that next to Nell or
Yeah,
Les Mis.
okay.
Dramatic.
You
difference.
tell me what's more dramatic.
Yeah.
That's fine. That's
So,
fine. I'll let you have that one.
I wish he would go back to more of those more challenging roles.
No, we're in agreement.
Honestly, the last dramatic performance I can really think of him was Gangs of New York,
I was going to say...
and that was a really heavy action-ish performance too.
Okay.
So that doesn't even really count.
And even that was over a decade ago at this point.
Yeah, so I don't know.
So,
Yeah, you're right.
yeah.
It's a good point.
Run All Night is fair.
It's okay.
You know?
You know.
But like those ones you mentioned, Joe, John Wick was much better than this.
Yeah.
It had a better kind of everything.
Mm-hmm.
Reeves was doing something pretty good for him, a little bit different. And the villains were generic, but they were defined at least.
They had clear motivations, yeah.
Here there's just like...
Nothing.
Just everybody's after him, and it's like...
He doesn't seem like that bad of a guy for somebody that's killed like 57 people.
Right.
And because it's Liam Neeson, and you know that you can't buy it.
Right.
Like, man, I'm sad. No, you're fine. They probably all deserved it. You're going to, kick some butt. Like, that's why, like, when they were trying to do it at the beginning of the movie, saying, oh, he's dressing up as the Santa and taking crap from the guy's son, like, you're just going to go into a particular set of skills in, like, half an hour. And you're going to be a completely different person. So.
By the way, most awkward, I hope Razzie-worthy scene of all time this year.
Where he plays the Santa?
Just
that was
so
bad.
Weird and out
That was
of
some
place.
bad acting.
That was really a weird scene altogether.
Yeah.
Didn't like it too much.
Well, and this even borrows from non-Neeson movies. I mean, the part where he goes to the football stadium to blend in with the crowd is right out of Safe House. And I'm sure they borrowed it from... or Drive. You're right, he does it in Drive as well. So it's worth watching maybe if it's, comes on cable for free or something.
No need to see this one in theaters.
Yeah, I don't think you need to rush out and see it.
Nah, not really.
All right, well, up next we've got What We Do in the Shadows, and that's with Justin.
Vampire flatmates Viago, played by Taika Waititi, Deacon, played by Jonathan Brew, and Vladislav, played by Jermaine Clement, have lived together for centuries and kept their actions out of the public eye. Over the course of several months, the mundanities of their lives are documented by a film crew, from trying to get, quote, invited into nightclubs to accidentally turning a victim into a vampire. Now, this may sound like basically the feature film version of maybe an SNL sketch, but no pun intended, last time I promise, damned if this wasn't fun to watch. Admittedly, it doesn't always work, and it has a couple subplots that don't quite have the comedic punch they want it to, but when this hits, it's really, really funny. My other big issue is I think it has a little bit of an episodic nature, but fortunately, what balances that out is I feel like each segment has at least one or two funny bits to keep it lively, keep it interesting, and really let these people shine. Their chemistry's there, it hits when it wants to, and you can clearly tell that everyone involved is having fun with this movie. I can't say it's perfect, but you know what? I'll take it. I give it a B+.
Joe, how about you for What We Do in the Shadows?
I'm glad I saw this one. It was quite a surprise. I didn't know anything about it. I really liked this movie a lot, actually. I thought that there was some really good comedy here. I thought there was some cool commentary on the comedic aspects of the vampire and supernatural crazes of recent years in pop culture, but also a touch of some seriousness at moments. I thought the actors were having a great time. I do agree that there was one particular subplot with one character they're just building up to, and I thought, okay, this seems really funny, and then it kind of hits, and you're like, oh, well, it's not as funny as I thought it was going to be. It was funny, but it was like, wish that would have been better, but I loved the characters. I loved their conflict. I felt genuinely bad when bad things happened. I thought that, considering the fact the budget was very low, they utilized that, kind of going off the cheesy nature of the old films. This movie was really fun and unique and a really great surprise. Very funny. I give it an A.
Wow, very nice. Well, like most mockumentaries, this falls prey to the how do we keep the momentum going factor. Mm-hmm. The guys here almost find enough angles to keep the comedy alive. No pun intended, Joe. But even with a short runtime, I did think it was a little slow in some parts. Certainly not all the jokes or even plot lines land. I agree with you, Joe. I think I know exactly where you were going with that.
That one was disappointing, really.
But I admire what it's attempting, and what's great about it is it's really mocking two genres. In addition to vampire films and TV shows, it's expertly satirizing reality television. And that actually is the greatest strength of the movie, because you'd think you're going in watching just a vampire movie, and really it's skewering two things, both pretty well, I think.
I'd agree with that.
So, for me, it's a B+. I agree that, Justin, the jokes could have been a little bit better. There were some scenes where, like you mentioned, the scene itself maybe was kind of clever, like, okay, they're doing something, a little bit witty here, but it didn't quite have the jokes to back it up sometimes.
Not always. Like the whole thing with, let's just say, a rival group of creatures. Mm-hmm. Was curious to see where it was going. Thought at one point it was just going to be like a one-note gag, and then they brought him back, and it just didn't quite gel the way I was hoping it would.
Yeah, same. But Joe, you really thought it fired kind of on all cylinders, huh?
I really liked the way that group went, actually, and it added a good twist, and it really built off the relationship between those groups, and I thought that was really awesome.
Okay.
So yeah, so I thought that actually worked. It was probably one of the best minor plot points of the movie.
Huh, interesting. What would you say was the strongest plot point of the movie? Because I agree with Justin, it is very episodic, which makes sense because of the reality TV skewering. But...
Right.
Well, that's tough because each character has their own arc, obviously, and I liked them all. I think my favorite was actually the main character Iago. I liked his romance thing.
Okay.
I really liked the way that was all. I thought that was a very nice, sweet message. I think that's why I didn't mind the fact the comedy wasn't always hitting on cylinders, because the movie just had such a good feeling to it. It was very, very sweet, very wholesome, and I thought that was kind of purveying despite the darker nature of some things. I thought it kind of contrasted the dark comedy as well. So
okay.
I think his story was probably my favorite, actually.
Interesting.
Yeah.
I liked when they brought the human in.
The human was
and
a
took him in. I thought that was the strongest point of the movie.
Oh, yes.
Sean,
Steve.
right? Or Steve, yeah.
Stu.
Yes. It's only with an S, obviously.
We like him better.
No, yeah, that was funny, yeah. I thought that was a good aspect, yeah.
I also liked how the one plot point ended, and it wrapped up very quickly, just with like 1 or 2 lines, but how the one vampire had like his
servant.
Yeah.
Basically, slave servant woman.
Yeah.
I thought that wrapped up very well, actually, and
funny.
had a good punch to it.
Oh yeah, there's a lot of cool stuff.
Yeah, so definitely one to check out. And I'm a Jermaine Clement fan. We discussed this, when we talked about Muppets Most Wanted, and
Rio 2?
Certainly, yeah, I was going to say he was certainly one of the highlights of Rio 2, one of the few, really,
Basically,
when it comes down to it. But his villain in the Rio films is one of the only things that keeps his going. But good. I'm glad you liked it, Joe.
It was very good.
And let's hear from you next on Open Windows, our home media moment for the week.
Open Windows is a 2014 English-language Spanish thriller film directed and written by Nacho Vigalondo, and it stars Elijah Wood in a lead role. Wood plays Nick Chambers, the webmaster of a fan site devoted to his favorite actress, Jill Goddard, played by Sasha Grey. After winning a contest to interview her, Nick flies out to meet her. He learns from Jill's manager, Cord, that she canceled the meeting, leaving Chambers understandably upset. Cord offers retribution by sharing a link with Nick that he has hacked into Jill's phone, computer, and a variety of cameras installed in various locations to keep tabs on her. Nick soon finds himself drawn into a vicious game of cat and mouse, as Cord may have more deadly intentions for Jill than he thought. This movie really is reminiscent of Wood's other over-the-top thriller, Grand Piano. It's a very mixed bag for me, just barely failing to reach guilty pleasure status. I cannot deny that stylistically, this movie looks very cool, with most of it taking place from a POV of various types of cameras, with constantly changing but smoothly transitioning perspectives. I also think Wood gives a fun performance, and the villain, much like Cusack's sniper, is rather chilling. The biggest problem, though, with this film, besides the fact the plot is completely dependent on Nick just not saying no and cutting the connection at any point to the guy being more than just a little suspicious, is that it doesn't take time to breathe. The plot just keeps getting so ridiculous and unbelievable that the details get lost and you start to lose interest about halfway through the film. Still, it was very entertaining for about half the time. I leave it with the C-.
Well, I feel like this movie could have actually had some potential.
Definitely there.
If one of 2 things happened.
Okay.
Number one, the direction wasn't this frantic mess reminiscent of some sort of like dreadful MTV show trying way too hard to be cool. Mm-hmm. Or if there was any life in just one of the actors. Or if the script made any sense, too. That would be a third thing,
that's another thing, yes.
I mean, I see what they're going for here, and it could have been something, but it just isn't. Wood gives, by a clear mile, the worst performance of his career. You thought he was fun. Oh, this was awful. His reactions to what's going on are so completely over
Corny.
the top.
It's hilarious.
Corny. You just can't take this movie seriously for a second. Now, unlike Grand Piano, which you just mentioned, the Wood thriller we reviewed last year, it had some of the same elements as Open Windows, but was actually fun to watch. I had no fun watching this. It reeks so desperately of trying to be a cutting-edge version of, like, Rear Window, and it fails on literally every cylinder, so I fail Open Windows. Justin?
Oh, wow.
After last year's Grand Piano, I certainly wasn't expecting too much from this one, but since the last was so bad it was actually entertaining, I thought this might be fun to review. There's no question that it's bad, but the question I think that should be on our listeners' minds are, is it so bad that it's good like Grand Piano? Somewhat. The first 2/3 are relatively by-the-numbers Grand Piano-style idiocy. until the last 20 minutes where it sputters completely off the rails with random twists.
Yeah. That's where I lost it too, yeah.
And a done-to-death commentary on cyberspace online communities. It's not enough to fail it because I did find some of it sort of like so bad it's kind of entertaining. But it comes so close. I leave it with a D-.
Yeah, it's so bad.
It's a ridiculously bad movie.
And, you know, and what is the difference? Because Grand Piano is also over the top. Now, Joe, you gave both movies around the same grade, around the C level.
C+ for Grand Piano.
Okay, so for you, Grand Piano was also better.
Oh, definitely.
I don't understand. Elijah Wood is a good actor. We've seen him do many things.
Yes.
Things in Middle-earth, things with Macaulay Culkin and The Good Son.
Asteroids.
Things with asteroids. Why?
I can tell you why.
Are these reactions? What?
I can tell you why. The answer to your question is Lord of the Rings. He made a ton of money. Mm-hmm. He never has to work a day in his life. He's just going to do whatever the heck he wants. Now, I know you think his performance was bad. It was intentionally bad. It was intentionally campy. It was intentionally go for the top.
Joe, it's like they're trying to go into this sort of like pulp
it's
Rear Window kind of thing.
Over the top.
It's like, no, don't talk down to me just because you can. I mean, they were even trying to do that from the get-go, and I could get it, but I didn't care.
If this were another movie, if this were the same movie, but with another actor, right, that you didn't know, wouldn't you have thought that this guy should be, like, banned from Hollywood? He's so terrible and over the top? Because I understand what you're saying. Elijah Wood just wants to have fun.
Well, you know what? But maybe if it wasn't, like, if it was just some no-name actor, maybe I would be a little harder on him. But I do feel like it was intentionally trying to be campy. Like, I don't think it was him acting badly. I think it was him acting badly on purpose.
Okay.
I think he was going for camp, honestly. So I'm not saying it might not have worked, and that's fine. But like the movie was just so silly for me. But there was a lot going on, so I was engaged about half the time.
But you're also right that the movie doesn't need to exist. When the guy first calls him, Elijah Wood could say, "Oh, well, you fooled me. I thought I was going to meet this girl. All right, I'm going to go home now."
That's why I was intrigued, because the movie should have been over after 5 minutes. Okay.
Yes.
Oh, okay. Well, I'm sorry. The meeting was canceled. Oh, well, that's messed up. Yeah, I work for the website. Sorry, let me check into it. Okay. Well, hey, let me help you out here. Here's a feed to a camera. What? Oh, yeah. And I got this, and I got this here. And then, why are you doing this? Oh, just do this. Why are you doing this? Who are you? Not just do this. Click, goodbye.
Right. I'm good. See ya.
And then the movie would have been over. The whole plot would have failed if Elijah Wood just wasn't a little more curious. He just keeps going with it, even though clearly he shouldn't.
Yeah.
It's
by a landslide.
It's hilarious. It's just
Sasha Grey's awful too.
Well, it's Sasha Grey.
Well, I know, but still terrible.
To be fair, I didn't know who she was. I had to look her up because I was like, okay, is there something? Oh,
my apologies in advance, Joe.
She is a former pornographic actress.
Is that who she is?
Yep.
Oh, I just know that she's a singer. She sang on one of Eminem's songs. She was a porn star.
Primarily.
Yep.
Oh.
So yeah, that was
out of my wheelhouse.
That's
okay.
Her primary acting experience is
I see. Well, that does make a lot of sense then.
There you go. But I don't know. I thought it was ridiculous.
But, it is ridiculous, but I don't think in a good way.
But I don't know. I thought there was some elements of uniqueness to it that I liked. Like stylistic, I liked what they were going for. I thought it was very unique, and it stood out to me in that sense. I haven't really seen anything like that. So
I don't know. I was thinking overkill, to be honest with you.
Yeah, I think they were just trying way too hard.
Particularly in the last scene.
Yeah.
Maybe they were trying way too hard, but even so, still never really seen anything like that to that extent.
I suppose that's fair.
I had to give it points for that. I thought it was cool. Like I liked the fact that it was constantly changing like that. It was cool, you know. I'm not gonna lie, but the problem is it just never stopped. You know, it really there were too many big plot holes that I didn't care. By the time there's the big twist and you find out what's really going on with her, and it's like
you got to end it by then.
By that point, I was totally checked out. So like let's put it this way: stick with Elijah Wood, and then there's a certain point where you'll have no reason to be invested at all anymore.
Right. Okay, well, that's going to wrap up our new releases. Right now, we're going to get into our top 5 because we've got 2 Divergent films that we're talking about this week on the show. We decided to do our top 5 young adult film adaptations from a popular book series or a standalone book, maybe. Justin, let's start with you on your top 5.
Number 5, Nick and Nora's Infinite Playlist. I think this is a young adult adaptation that doesn't get a whole lot of love, but it does have a place dear in my heart. I I saw this kind of when I needed sort of like a quick pick-me-up, and I really enjoyed it. I thought they had really good chemistry. I thought the music was good. I thought the side characters were great. It brought a lot of reminiscence of some of those like classic 80s comedies. Number 4, Hugo. I think this really shows that Scorsese doesn't have to be all about F-bombs, nudity, and gangsters, but he really does show off how much he can create a really compelling atmosphere, a really great actor and a great actress to play off of him, Chloe Grace Moretz,
Yep.
and really create this fascinating venue to explore film history in ways that I would never deem possible prior to it. I thought it was easily one of the best surprises of 2011, and I'm very curious to see how it'll stand the test of time. Number 3, The Princess Bride. When we have to review movies like And So It Goes, this is one of those movies that reminds you that once upon a time this guy did actually make good movies. Say what you will about whether or not it still holds up, but I mean there's still some really solid writing. There are great characters in this, some really cool performances. I think it's insanely quotable. And number 2, which is a movie I'm sure Dan will be very happy that I put on this list, The Perks of Being a Wallflower.
No, I would be mad if you didn't put it on the list.
I never read the book. I'm sure I will eventually. This was just a solid, true to form account of high school life. Great acting, really solid writing, and just absolutely, and really balances the general genre bend of drama and comedy smoothly. You don't see too many movies anymore that have that balance. I think this is one of the better ones. I was near tears by the end of the film.
All right, well, I'll go ahead with my list. I have an honorable mention to kick it off, and that is The Sisterhood of the Traveling Pants. We see a lot of the young adult movies aimed at women, like the Divergents and the Vampire Academies and all the ones that we always mention. But this is such a different take on that because obviously it's aimed at young women, but it doesn't put so much of an emphasis on the romance as it does on friendship and family, and there's really good performances here. It's not a masterpiece, but it's certainly fun, and the second one is not bad as well. My number 5, Justin, is as well Nick and Nora's Infinite Playlist.
Oh, really?
I think this is a fantastic movie. It is one of Michael Cera's best, to be completely honest, and you're absolutely right. The John Hughes style of this movie is so evident, and it's one of the few that pulls it off well. We see a lot of, because obviously filmmakers that are out now grew up watching John Hughes movies.
Here, here.
And we see a lot of attempts at something like that.
That awkward moment.
That awkward moment's a great example. And it just doesn't work out that well. But here, everything just works great. The music is great. It's funny. Number 4 for me is Harry Potter and the Sorcerer's Stone. Now, I chose this particular installment of the series for a couple reasons. Number 1, it's the only one I've seen multiple times. And for that reason, number 2, I watched all 8 of the movies over the course of like 2 months, and a lot of them blend together for me for that reason. This is easily identified as the first movie, and I think it is probably in my top 2 or 3 of the entire series, just in general. I think it sets up the world great. I think obviously these kids, they were 12 or something at the time.
Yeah.
Just are phenomenal actors.
Oh, yeah.
So that's my number 4. Number 3 for me, and actually all the movies in my top 3 are films where I've also read the book. So it's a little easier for me to compare, and see how the film holds up to the book. And number 3 for me is The Hunger Games. I love the first movie in this series very much. And really as equally as the book. It changed a few things that I thought were cool. It deleted a couple things that I thought weren't necessary. And it's just a great movie. We've talked about it a few different times on this show, so I won't go into too much detail there. Number 2 is a movie I don't know if we've ever brought up on the show, and that is The Outsiders. I saw this movie back when I was in middle school, shortly after it came out, I suppose. And we had to read the book in English class. Well, we didn't have to. I guess I chose to. But I did a book report on it and then watched the movie afterwards to compare. And I watched it again about 2 or 3 years ago, and it still holds up 100%. It's such a good book and a great film adaptation. Some really great early performances. Tom Cruise, Matt Dillon, the list goes on and on there. So very highly recommended, both the book and the movie, I think, for The Outsiders. Joe?
The way I did my list, actually, was I wanted to judge them by honestly how really honestly good I thought the quality of the movies was. And apparently these were all YA adaptations. Some of them I had no idea.
Okay.
Number 5 is Hunger Games, the first movie. I'm not a huge fan of the Hunger Games. From what I know about it, I honestly personally like the movies less and less as they go on.
Okay.
But the first movie is really good. I did think it was really an interesting story. I thought there were some great performances here. I really liked the setup of the world. It's a very good film.
Mm-hmm.
Number 4, well, couldn't have a list like this with at least one Harry Potter mentioned because obviously a big Harry Potter fan. So I had to figure out which one is my favorite. I'm going to go with The Chamber of Secrets, number 2. It's always probably, of the 2 Chris Columbus films, I think it's slightly better than the first one. But I just think that's because the story is a little better, personally. It's easily one of the darkest of the books and the film, and I think it's also one of the best true adaptations of the actual book, which the first couple films really are, and everything else that follows after that is a very mixed bag. But number 3 is The Princess Bride. Just a really quotable, fun adventure movie. Really awesome. Glad I discovered this one a couple years ago and got on the hype. Really, really enjoy it. Great classic. Number 2 is Hugo. I mean, no idea that this was a kind of qualification for that, but excellent movie. A great love letter to film in general with some great performances and direction. Have to mention Hugo. Great movie. We talked about it.
Yeah, I didn't realize until this list that Hugo was a book at some point. I actually didn't know The Princess Bride was a book either, to be honest.
I had heard of it. I just wasn't entirely sure before doing this list whether or not it counted as a young adult book.
I would say so, yeah.
To be honest, I didn't think that
Young adult story.
like Harry Potter technically counted because I started reading it. It was like in 3rd grade, like everyone else did. But then again, that's the great thing. Some of these books are really aimed at a wide audience, so
yeah, Harry Potter definitely falls under that category.
I think the best ones can actually.
Justin, how about your tops? Number 1.
My number 1 is Harry Potter and the Chamber of Secrets. I feel like Harry Potter, movie-wise, was at its best when Chris Columbus was at the helm. I wish, for the life of me, he could have done all of them, or at least done the last 2, and kept David Yates very far away. But this...
He should have done them all.
he flat out should have, because he knew how to get the most out of not only the performances, but how to really bring J.K. Rowling's world to life. The reason I picked this one over Part 1, which I do admit is a very good movie, I feel like there's a lot more going on in the Chamber of Secrets, and I feel like there's a lot more to bring to life, getting to the deeper stories, exploring the mystery.
I would say, for me, the reason I put it on my list was because I felt that the first movie does a good job of setting things up, but the first book and first movie, it's mostly about setting things up.
Right.
Yeah. The second one gets to really get into its own full-fledged story.
Yeah.
So,
And like I mentioned before, I just wish the rest of the movies that followed could have been nearly as good as the first 2.
Well, they would be in my top 3 Harry Potter movies as well, Dan. 1, 2, and which one? That'll be the hard one to guess.
6?
Nope. 6 is like
part
one of
of
the worst. Yeah.
7?
Part 1 of 7.
Okay, well, for me, no big surprise. It's The Perks of Being a Wallflower. It's easily one of the greatest books and films regarding high school ever. And I think the fact that Stephen Chbosky, the author of the book, wrote the screenplay and directed, it just, having that singular vision of such a great work to begin with is something that we rarely see in movies today. Him having control of every aspect of that film really made his vision pop on the screen. Joe?
I think you'll like it.
Is it The Perks?
Yeah.
Yes!
Well, as I was looking through the list, as I said, I was trying to go by the quality of the film, and I just felt like, Perks of Being a Wallflower was a really excellent film. So it's easily number 1. I just thought it was like these guys said, it captures high school life perfectly, that mentality. Great performances. I think Emma does a great job. Here, just
yes, she does.
Really, really blows it out of the water, and really so does everybody else. It's just though we need a little more Paul Rudd, man. Just
I know it's such a shame that he's in the book a little bit more.
There's a couple minor things that were just I wish they fleshed out a little bit better. We got a little bit of Joan Cusack, and then just kind of leave that. That'll big plot point there. But overall, though, just a really well-made movie, and definitely recommend it if you haven't seen it.
And I feel like that is another really love letter to John Hughes filmmaking. Mm-hmm. Not so much with the book, but the movie clearly reeks of that era. And it even takes place in the 90s, so it's not that far after the John Hughes era.
Kind of like a 16 Candles sort of thing?
Yeah, it's very like 16 Candles, Pretty in Pink. Like, just the personalities that are in this movie, and really the actors that they got to play the parts are very... people I think Hughes would have approved of.
Easily.
I'll say it like that.
Greasy 80s people.
That's right. All right, well, we've already done the first of our triple feature movies at the top of the show. That was Divergent, so we just have 2 left. And first up is our old classic, and this was listener's choice for the month. So we thank listener Aiden for this selection. That is Go. This is a 1999 black comedy revolving around 3 different stories taking place over the same night, completely separate from each other, but happening simultaneously, just shown to the audience in separate acts, and then at the end they all merge together. All 3 stories involve in some way the same drug deal. It all starts at a grocery store with 3 co-workers, played by Sarah Polley, Desmond Askew, and Katie Holmes. Taye Diggs and Breckin Meyer co-star in a Vegas plotline. Scott Wolf and Jay Moore co-star as grocery store customers with their own connection to the drug deal, and Timothy Oliphant and William Fichtner are the drug dealers. Go is a film with many layers and plot lines, and in movies like this, where the character and plot focus shifts completely from act to act, there's usually a lot of ebb and flow with how strong each of the plot lines is. Fortunately for Go, though, the first one featuring Polly isn't quite as strong, but it builds from there, and the second and third portions are both great. I would say the middle part in Vegas is probably the strongest, but the conclusion sort of after the third storyline is also great. The film is shot well, the comedy is extremely funny in parts. Each portion had several laugh-out-loud moments. This came out at a time when time-concurrent storylines were sort of their own subgenre. You had Run Lola Run and Sliding Doors, the episode of Frasier they did with it. But Go is a standout in its own right, because while those had multiple timelines going, this is structured almost like a Pulp Fiction with everything happening at the same time. The biggest problem I have with it, though, is the first story isn't as funny or interesting and includes a very annoying drug-tripping scene with the one character I would lose overall, played by Nathan Bexton. But the other 2 more than make it worth a watch. I give it a B+. Justin?
For essentially being a teen version of Pulp Fiction, director Doug Liman, director of
The Bourne,
the original Bourne
movies,
movie,
and Swingers.
And Swingers.
Way back.
But director Doug Liman knows how to have fun with this. I do agree with you, Dan. I think the start takes a little while to get going. Sarah Polley's story doesn't quite have the punch it should, but once the pieces start fading together, the story starts to come to life, and it's a lot easier to invest your interest into.
Oh, yeah.
Leading to some laughs, a couple of decent twists. I thought a few were a little anticlimactic, just expecting what the setup was, in terms of anticipating what the payoff was going to be. Mm-hmm. Not every story element makes as much sense as it should, and I think some of the tonal changes throughout the movie create a little whiplash, at least for me anyways. But for the most part, Go's a fun piece of 90s filmmaking nostalgia. I leave it with a B.
Right. Well, Joe, how about for you on Go?
Well, Go definitely feels like it was coming off of the Pulp Fiction craze. I mean, whether it was narratively or thematically or dialogue-wise, a lot of movies were especially a lot of British like crime comedy thrillers around this time were kind of going off the Pulp Fiction wave. And pretty much in the 90s, there's a lot of movies that were kind of copying it. I think this movie does a pretty good job of that. I do agree. The first part of the story was like okay, but once we get to Vegas, it's hilarious. I mean, that whole sequence was just great. Everybody was doing amazing. Taye Diggs has like so many great lines. It's constant movement. It really is appropriately titled Go. The third part, not quite as good, but still very good. You know, and I do agree. That's actually pretty much sums it up well. There are some minor tonal issues. I don't think it all quite fits with the ending, but overall though, I thought the story was pretty awesome. There were a lot of good laughs. I had a great time watching it. I actually leave it with an A-.
Wow, very good. Yeah, it's a shame that first portion just doesn't have a little more punch.
It's like okay. But I'm glad you hated that one scene. That stupid stoner scene.
Awful.
Was like, added nothing.
Honestly,
nothing.
If that wasn't in the movie, or maybe if they axed the character completely, I could see easily giving it an A-, maybe even an A. I mean, it just dragged that whole first portion down, because it's like 2-3 minutes. And it's unnecessary, and he's not funny.
Honestly, other than that scene, I don't even remember anything about his character. I don't know what he contributed at all. Lines, nothing.
Nothing, because they leave him in the box, in the garbage.
Oh, okay, that was funny. That was the funniest thing about it. That was funny. But you forgot about it.
You forgot about it.
They did.
And, yeah, they forgot about him until the end of the movie. Yeah. Where the payoff wasn't really... There was no good payoff with his character, as there was with Timothy Oliphant's character. Katie Holmes had a nice arc there. She's not even in it that much, luckily, because I don't like her. But she even has a nice place to shine there at the end when everything comes together.
And hey, Jay Moore did play a nice person. A
For
little
change.
bit. A little bit.
A little bit.
A little bit. This is about as nice as I've ever seen him.
About as nice as we can say about Jay Moore. That's true.
Though you haven't seen him in Jane Austen's Mafia. He's a pretty nice guy there.
No, I have not seen him in Jane Austen's Mafia. It is interesting to see, though, how, all these people were so young back. Timothy Oliphant, especially.
I didn't recognize him at
He
first.
has aged in the last 15 years for sure.
Well, that's justice for you.
But
Guess
Taye Diggs looks about the same.
Yeah.
And even he's a little baby-faced in this, too.
A little bit, yeah, but, he's still rocking it. He was probably the standout. I don't know. I mean, I thought,
yeah.
the British guy was funny.
Fitchner had some pretty good lines.
Yeah, that's true. Fitchner had some good ones. There's a lot of, little cameos in here, too, of people that later became famous. Jane Krakowski from 30 Rock, Melissa McCarthy.
Yeah, real young.
This is very, very interesting. Have either of you guys seen Swingers, by the way?
No.
I actually never have.
Really?
I know a lot about it.
I might have to run that sometime. I saw it just once when I was in college, and it was quite the quotable movie around college, obviously.
It's the big
Understandable.
starting point for Favreau and Vince Vaughn. So.
Yeah, that's very true. And it's funny, I always thought that Jon Favreau directed Swingers, but apparently not. Apparently it's Lyman. I thought that's where he got his start directing.
Okay.
Oh, yeah. Did he write it or something?
Maybe they wrote
Could've
it.
been.
Maybe that's what it was.
I think he was involved in more than just acting.
Yeah. But I thought the directing here was good.
Mm-hmm.
Lyman, I guess I've only seen Swingers in the Bourne movie that he did.
Yep.
So I don't know him from anything else, but yeah, I think he has a pretty keen eye for what's funny in a shot. Because there is some physical comedy here, with the car.
Well, he definitely seems based on his films that I've seen, he's definitely based around movement.
He's
got an eye for detail.
He definitely knows how to capture the physical movement of things to keep keep that flow going.
And Swingers, you could say the same. No, I think it's rare that a movie like this sort of, you do get that, this scene is just as good as the last. And Pulp Fiction has a lot of that as well. There's certainly even more going on in Pulp Fiction.
Easily.
Yeah.
Oh, yeah.
So, all right, well, good. Good listener's choice. We'll be doing another one for April, so let us know if you have an idea for listener's choice. It just has to be more than 2 years old, and we will consider it. So get those to us on the Facebook group, Film Fanatics with an exclamation point, or you can always just leave us a message here on the YouTube channel. All right, well, we're going to close with our Oscar A to Z movie, and that is The Assassination of Jesse James by the coward Robert Ford. It's a 2007 film nominated for Supporting Actor for Casey Affleck and Best Cinematography. Justin?
Since his youth, Robert Ford, played by Casey Affleck, has idolized the Wild West outlaw Jesse James, played by Brad Pitt, and his everlasting impression on the public. Though as time goes on, living with Jesse and his gang, Ford slowly discovers the man's darker and much more sinister nature, and to survive and become someone, Ford may have to embrace that side in himself. There's an important thing to understand about this movie before going in that I think is imperative to reviewing it, and that's to not go in expecting it as a straightforward Western. And I don't necessarily consider that a bad thing. Yes, there are intense moments, and even in some instances of the movie's 2.5-hour running time, little gunplay, but what makes this film work is the fascinating character study regarding what exactly does it mean in the public eye to be a legend. For that, it's not always the easiest to watch, and certainly doesn't make Pitt's interpretation of the outlaw necessarily likable, or even Robert Ford for that matter, but it gives us these really complicated characters that are paired with really awesome cinematography and lighting to help us establish who these people are, where they are in their lives, and ultimately help us see the overarching story as a whole. At 2 hours and 30 minutes, I do feel like it runs on 20 to 30 minutes a little too long, but I never got bored, and I thought that there were some really haunting imagery that still stuck with me well after it was over. It's not for everyone, and some of the best movies aren't, but for the right crowd, The Assassination of Jesse James by the coward Robert Ford is well worth a watch, and certainly one of the more unique westerns I've seen. I leave it with an A-.
Well, it is certainly long. It's far too long, easily probably a half hour, 40 minutes. But because of that, I think you would really need to love westerns to not be a little bored by it. I was definitely a bit bored in parts. But that being said, Affleck truly gives a great, surprising performance here. So much so that I actually thought he showed up Pitt in a lot of the movie. It's not one of my favorite Pitt performances, actually. But I think what I like the most about this movie, Justin, is exactly what you said. Despite its runtime, it's really not about the shoot 'em up that we see in so many westerns. We really get to know both of these characters very well by the end as people, not just as gunslingers, but as celebrities, as humans, and on top of that, it is beautifully shot. So, for me, it's a B. Joe?
I definitely can agree with you guys on a lot of points. I think that the movie definitely has segments where I feel like there could have easily been something cut out. Like, it's definitely too long. You could tell the story just as well without some of these scenes. And that's definitely the biggest problem with it, is some of the build-up is a little bit lacking because of the pacing there. But once we get into the progression of the film, there really are tackling some really interesting ideas about the concept of the Legend of the West, which you guys talked about. Not just these individuals as who they were, but how the public views them and how that changes your perception of things. And just the progression of Robert Ford's character and what happens to him, and just how that develops. Like, really, the last 45 minutes of the movie is A+ worthy. Like, it's really fantastic. The problem is everything before that is
it's a bit of a slog.
It's a very mixed bag, and I mean that's where the issue is. I wish it had a stronger start, because I was waning my interest a little bit in there, but the ending is just amazing. So, which is interesting, because you'd think that the ending would have less impact, but here it had the most impact.
Yeah.
So, very interesting in that sense. Definitely one of Affleck's best performances for sure. I thought Pitt was okay. He was just kind of doing his crazy shtick. I don't know.
Yeah.
It was interesting, but I don't know. It's hard to say. But I do agree, though, beautifully shot. I think one thing I do like about it is that it felt genuine. I like it when they're able to create a real atmosphere. It looks like it is the time period. Get the clothing right. Get the atmosphere. Like, it really felt like you were in the Old West, which a lot of movies at that time don't do. It feels very Hollywoodized. So definitely got to give it points for that. I'm actually in between you guys. I give it a B+.
Okay. Yeah, I was blown away by Affleck in this. I mean, he's all right and stuff I've seen him in.
Well, he's just kind of always the really quiet guy.
Sort of, yeah.
Like, when I heard this was his nomination, I was just like, really? They nominated Affleck and not Pitt? Because I love Brad Pitt. But he was okay here.
Well, you know what?
I mean, you just showed us 12 Monkeys last week, so,
this is the thing.
That was a great Pitt performance.
I think Casey Affleck is actually a decent actor. I have seen him give some pretty decent performances. Actually, I thought he was pretty good in what was it, Gone Baby Gone?
He was good in that.
He can give good performances. I think the issue with him is, I don't know if maybe it's just the issue of his brother helps get him in to the door, and that's why he gets roles. But I feel like he just doesn't have that much great material generally to work with. He doesn't,
could be.
Remember,
Possible.
Out of the Furnace, that character was annoying anyway. So, and that seems to be what he's ham-fisted into.
That movie.
But he seems to end up in these roles where he plays the annoying wussy guy, and he can do a little more than that. Here he is ironically kind of playing that type, but more complex. So maybe it's just the script he needs to work with.
Could be.
Because obviously we liked it here, so there you go.
What did you think of Pitt, Justin? I know you're not typically that much of a fan.
I don't know. I like the subtle Pitt for this one.
Okay.
I like the fact that he wasn't trying to be overly in your face like in 12 Monkeys, or trying to have this sort of hidden aggression, or trying to contain his demons like in Fury. I like this more emotional side of him that I think fits in well with the context of the story. Does he pop like some of his other stuff? Not necessarily, but he works for what the story is trying to convey.
So you think it worked for the character?
Yeah, I think it came with the territory.
Okay.
I thought it was an interesting interpretation, but I could have been fine with your standard Pitt here.
Yeah, me too.
You know what I mean? You're kind of
I didn't need to see subdued Pitt.
You know what I mean? Like his you know how general you know how every actor has that general type they usually play.
Yes.
I feel like what you expect Jesse James would be looks like Brad Pitt. Basically. Keep his hair blonde. It's
right.
It would have been there. I don't know. I don't know if it would have necessarily worked for the movie, but I just felt like it would have fit more with the legend of Jesse James, which is what they were kind of playing with anyway.
Yeah, I very much liked that there was not that much action here.
No, but when it happened, it was good.
Yeah, when it happened, the action was good. I just wish that they had figured out where to cut the dramatic parts. Because there's too many. We watched this separately. You guys watched it together, and I watched it the next day.
Yeah.
And halfway through the movie, or maybe even longer than that, maybe an hour and 45 through the movie, I came through, and Joe says to me, "Oh, you didn't really miss anything."
And I'd still stand by that.
And then I watched it the next day, and I'm like, wow, he wasn't joking.
Well,
there's not that much that goes on in the first hour and a half of this movie.
The biggest problem is really, is that Jesse's going crazy, and he's basically taking out members of his own gang. But I feel like that loses impact because for all the time we spend talking with these guys, it doesn't feel like we know or care about them. So anytime one of them dies, it's like, oh, I forgot about them already. Mm-hmm. So I don't know what they could have done there to enhance that. But that was probably the biggest issue, is that the first hour or so of the plot, most of it I didn't care.
Right.
So...
And didn't have, like you said, didn't have much impact.
Because you could literally walk away from the TV, seriously, for 5 minutes, come back, you might have missed some pretty shots, but generally speaking, you would still get the majority of the plot. So,
yeah.
I don't know what that says there. What do you think about that, Justin?
I don't know. I mean, I understand the whole, like, okay, we have no emotional connection to them, but like you said, this is a story about a man going crazy. The fact that his gang doesn't have the most character development, I feel like isn't that important because that's not the story that we're focusing on. I feel like the more that we bring ourselves into that story, do I agree that it could be cut down in those sections? Absolutely. But I feel like they do have their place, particularly in understanding like what exactly happens to them, how exactly they fit into the overall like sort of descent into madness that leaves Affleck having to make some big decisions and so on.
So I guess it didn't really impact you so much because you were more enjoying the Jesse James personality descent rather than who he was killing.
More or less. Right? I feel like that's what this movie's trying to do.
Yeah, it is. I mean, I don't know. It would have been a little nice, I guess, if we have this long movie to at least know something about these guys as they go. But I can see it from both angles, I suppose. Sam Rockwell.
Yeah.
There we go. And Renner.
Great performance from him. Very, early Renner performance. There's a lot of... Every time somebody new popped up, I was like, wow, I know that guy too.
Oscar Gold, man.
Yeah, a lot of early performances from people here. All right, well, that is going to do it for the show this week. Next week, we will have Joe's pick for Old Classic, but don't forget, listeners, you get to pick one selection every month for Old Classic, so go ahead and do that. If you have an idea for April, we certainly thank Aiden for our Go selection this month. And Joe, what's popping on the old Merlin channel?
Oh, just some random blogs. I actually did a recent rant about how there's just a constant tendency to just... we talked about it recently regarding remakes and sequels and how Hollywood's just kind of getting so used to building up franchises and how it seems like it's suffering from originality and it's taking away from some of those films. Like how last Oscars that we had, we didn't do as well viewership-wise because these great films that were a little more independent, people didn't care about.
Right, nobody sees them.
Everybody's so attracted to the studios, the big franchises. That's something I wanted to touch on a little bit. So that was a recent video I did.
Oh, very cool. For those that don't know, sometimes Joe will do a full review on one of the movies we talk about on the show. The Chappie one was very interesting. And you can join us on Facebook, like I said earlier, Film Fanatics with an exclamation point, Twitter feed at Film Fanatics Pod. And if you have not subscribed yet to our channel, go ahead and do that. We'd love to have you aboard. And that is going to do it for this week. So thanks so much for listening, and we'll see you back here next time. Bye!